Hello, my name is Rachel, and today I will be discussing the comparative Chinese philosophies. So first, I want to start off by giving some historical background about the time of ancient China before discussing the three philosophies. So many historians compare the Zhao state in ancient China to feudal states of medieval Western Europe due to the economic and social systems of hierarchy that took place. During the Zhao state, which ranged from approximately 1046 to 246 BCE, feudal aristocrats ruled the territories of the Zhao dynasty. However, as time went on, the system gradually broke down. The king's relatives began to rule independently of him, kinship ties were weakened, and internal fighting and violence among the Zhao leaders invited external invasion from northern tribes. From the years 772 to 446 BCE, the spring and autumn periods emerged, which brought about a war between the seven states. And the seven states are as follows: the Qin, Chu, Yang, Han, Zhao, He, and Wei. Pardon me if I mispronounced any of those names. From this came the Warring States period, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the next slide, which was a time of philosophical creativity. The following three schools of thought emerged: Confucianism, Taoism, also known as Taoism, and legalism. All three sought great efforts to restore the collapsing Zhao dynasty through peace, harmony, and unity in society. However, each school of thought had its own systems of beliefs and practices. Therefore, benevolent government, according to each school of thought, varied. Confucianism focused on virtue, while Taoism or Taoism focused on balance and harmony of nature, and finally, legalism focused on strict laws and reinforcements. The Warring States period took place during approximately 481-403 BCE to 221 BCE, and during this time, Chinese states were fighting for territorial dominance. Also during this time, the Zhao state was crumbling, and therefore the Zhao state was forced to rely on other armies. And by the 4th century BCE, the 7 major states, which I talked about in the previous slide, were created. Now I'm going to go into this a little bit later into the presentation, but the Qin state was victorious. Also, it's important to note that during the Warring States period, there were developments in society, trade, agriculture, philosophy, and the arts. Confucianism was one of the three schools of thoughts which emerged from the Warring States period. Confucianists believed that good leadership could be learned by observing leaders of their past. There was a strong emphasis on the patriarchal family. Confucianist beliefs were based on the teachings of Confucius, who is a Chinese philosopher and teacher who lived from 551 to 479 BCE. Throughout his lifetime, he composed several books on ethics, good behavior, and moral character. Confucianists believed in filial piety, virtue, and respect of one's ancestors. Confucianism believes in ancestor worship and human-centered virtues for living a peaceful life. The golden rule of Confucianism is, do not do unto others what you would not want others to do unto you. So for me, that's similar to the golden rule from the Bible. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. In Confucianist philosophy, the ethical moral behavior of the ruler trickled down onto his people. Good moral character was achieved through Ren, which is also known as humanity. And Confucianists identified virtues to be humaneness, dutifulness, wisdom, good faith, and observance of ritual. Virtue had much to do with positive human relationships. The following two quotes are from the Analects of Confucius, which were short stories / conversations about various leaders during the time of his philosophy. The following quote, or the first quote, highlights the importance of having a good moral leader. The master said, "One who governs through virtue may be compared to the pole star which occupies its place while the host of other stars pay homage to it." I took this to mean a good leader occupies the center of their society, and all citizens within that society must show honor to that leader. In other words, a corrupt leader will create a corrupt society. The other quote states, "The virtue of a noble person is like wind, and the virtue of the small people is like grass. When the wind blows over the grass must end." In this case, the ancestors are like wind, which causes the grass to blow over. In reference to filial piety, if ancestors teach their descendants proper virtue, it will in turn create a more just society. Citizens of that society must pay respect to their good leaders and ancestors so that morality and virtue can continue to prosper for generations to come. Another school of thought that emerged from the Warring States period was Taoism or Taoism. Lao Tzu was an ancient Chinese philosopher who founded Taoism. Taoist principles emphasize the importance of living in harmony with animals and the Tao, and the spiritual immortality. Taoism has been connected to the philosopher Lao Tzu, who around 500 BCE wrote the main book of Taoism, the Tao Te Ching. Again, forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Taoism holds that humans and animals should live in balance with the Tao, or the universe. Taoists believe in spiritual immortality, where the spirit of the body joins the universe after death. The book was a collection of poetry with cultural and political origins. The image of Tao, also known as God, was given legendary status. The Tao teaches that all living creatures must live in a state of harmony with the universe, and consequently, the energy found in the universe. This energy, called Qi or Qi, and it guides everything in the universe. It is important to note that Taoism was also a religion. So there were Taoist temples, monasteries, and priests. Yin and Yang, which I'm sure we've all heard before, was the Taoist belief of balancing forces. For example, without hot, cold cannot exist. Without pain, joy cannot exist. Everything in the universe is intertwined and nothing can exist completely by itself. To this day, historians are still unsure whether Lao Tzu was an actual person or simply a group of writers during the Warring States period who adopted Taoist beliefs. Taoist rulers were asked to observe nature and imitate the process. According to Taoist leadership, the spatial perceptions of nature were not meant to disrupt the process. The following quotes are taken from the excerpt listed in the title here. I do nothing, and the people are transformed by themselves. I value tranquility, and the people become correct by themselves. I take no action, and the people become prosperous by themselves. I have no desires, and the people of themselves become like uncharted wood. If nature is not interrupted, people are able to change. If nature is in balance, the people and animals on earth will also be in balance. People must treat Mother Nature with respect because they cannot exist without her. And the other quote states, let them savor their food and find beauty in their clothing, peace in their dwellings, and joy in their customs. Even though people have their own sets of beliefs, they must learn to live in peace and harmony together, and with nature, of course. Only then can people truly enjoy the gifts that life brings. The final school of thought I will be discussing that emerged from the Warring States period is legalism. Legalism in ancient China was a philosophical belief that human beings are more inclined to do wrong than right because they are motivated entirely by self-interest and require strict laws to control their impulses. It was developed by the philosopher Han Feizi, who lived from approximately 280 to 233 BCE of the state of Qin. Han Feizi was originally a member of the Confucius ideology, but eventually he transitioned to legalism after realizing that most humans were not innately good. He believed in order for humans to be productive members of society, they needed strict reinforcement. Unlike Confucianism, morality was of no concern to legalists. What one does to another will eventually come back to them. For example, if a man chooses to kill, he has every right to be killed himself. The penalties for breaking the law were severe. After legalism was eventually adopted by the Qin dynasty, Confucianism became less practiced. It is also important to note that Shang Yang was an important figure of the Qin dynasty, and he was successful in conquering the other warring states and unifying China. The first quote, which describes the philosophy of Shang Yang, is taken from the excerpt, Shang Yang making orders strict. In applying punishments, light offenses should be punished heavily. If light offenses do not appear, heavy offenses will not come. I took this to mean, if a person is punished after committing a mild offense, they will be significantly less likely to rebel in the future. This was a means of strict control. Similarly, Han Fei, who was born into the aristocracy of the Qin dynasty, was critical of Confucius ideologies. And in the excerpt Han Fei in the Han Feizi, the Five Vermin, it states, the best rewards are those that are generous and predictable, so that people may profit by them. The best penalties are those that are severe and inescapable, so that people will fear them. I took this to mean, without strict punishment, there cannot be generous rewards. If each person is on the same level of fear, there will be unification. And as we can see, they were successful in unifying China. After learning about each school of thought, it is clear that each one had their own approach to achieving a benevolent society. To reiterate, Confucianists believed that virtue could be taught through generations, while Taoists valued the harmony of nature and the human spirit. In contrast to Confucian ideology, legalists believed in strict punishment as a means of unification. While legalists were more successful in conquering the warring states and unifying China, they had to do so with a forceful hand. To live a benevolent life, people must learn to accept one another, be truthful to familial traditions, and be grateful for the beauty that Mother Nature provides. I want to thank you all for listening and watching the presentation, and I hope you learned something. Also, in the next slide, you will find my references. Thank you.